The change process is what creates value. So we've created a way to frame this, and a way to present this, and a way to discuss this. That we've called Path to High Performance. It's a culture change process, and this is the way that we now start to frame the work. I mean, in some ways, this is what we've done for the last 15 or 20 years, but now we're making this a lot more explicit, and it changes the dialogue. It makes us more mindful. In some ways, it's pretty simple to think, okay, we're going to launch a survey with 43,000 people in March, and then we're going to have these feedback meetings. It's quite a bit more complex to say we're going to enter into a process to fundamentally change this organization, to transform this organization, to improve it, to improve its performance. And so that's one of the key things that we've learned, is that looking at this more broadly is a real key to the success and to impacting the performance of the organization. So what I want to do in this is just give you a tour here of the model that we've developed and of the process. So what we start with is a phase that we call discovery. And there's one key question, and that's, why is the culture important to performance? I think culture is a code word for when there's this connection between the mindset of the people, the behavior, the way that they act, the values that they hold, and then the systems that they've created. And it's about this kind of curious link between the way we think, the way we act, and the systems that we build. Because at the end of the day, organizations are always human creations. We haven't found any organizations yet that didn't have people in them. Some of them have a few animals and some machines in there, but competitive advantage is built on human capability. There's no way around it. But understanding why and when do you need to dive into the culture issue to improve, to lead, to change an organization really implies that you've got to go back to, why is the culture important to performance? So after discovery, we get rooted in how this impacts performance. Then we go into a planning. You need to plan a process that goes on over quite a bit of time here. That, it includes some data collection and some diagnosis, analysis, honest conversations about the data, action planning, and then creating, implementing, changing, creating sustainable improvement. But if you wait until the 11th hour to start planning how you're going to do that, it's too late, especially the first time around. Where the learning curve is the steepest. But one of the key phases of this is, how are you going to design a process where you can ensure that effective and sustainable development of the organization is going to take place? After planning, we've defined a diagnostic process where we collect the data to assess the current state. That's the core that our business built from, is our ability to kind of assess that and provide some insight into that, and a process to discuss that and link that back to the performance, to change the way that you operate. But diagnosis is at the core of the business here. And so assessing what's the current state in the context of what's going to impact performance, and how you can design a process where you can ensure the effective development. Next stage in this is analysis. Okay, you've got this big mountain of data, and we have some, quite standard ways to analyze that and to work with that. We've also developed, literally hundreds of different ways to think about this, hundreds of ways to ask questions, to analyze the results so that you can make sense of it. The data, the data don't really speak for themselves. once in a while people will say that, will say, well, the data speak for themselves. And when they do that, I always kind of go over to the table and like, can you hear them now? They're not saying much, really. We've got to make sense of this. And it's in some ways harder than you might think. But what we found is there's a lot of opportunity in that, because as you start asking questions and you start collaborating with a client, with an organization, you learn a lot from that. You ask some questions, they ask some questions, you ask some questions about the questions they ask, and you keep going to say, is there any evidence to support this? Are there some results? Is there some data that we can use till you're ready to prime what we call a set of honest conversations. Not to imply that without us you'd only have dishonest conversations, but honest conversations about the current state and the challenges and the priorities for the future. That's the core of what makes an impact with this. And that face-to-face discussion that often takes place not just at one place in the organization, but at many places in the organization. That's key to starting to build the momentum with that. And, in different challenging results, difficult situation, hard to speak up, different ways of speaking up as you move around the world. Take, like a group of 10 people, one from, each region of the world, and present them with some difficult results. And the way that each person naturally reacts to those data is going to be very, very different in that. And so managing that process so that you do create common understanding out of this set of honest conversations. That's, as we've stepped back and looked at this and thought and reflected, that's the core of this. And so that's a key part too. But, you have to translate the results into action. One time I went into an organization and talked with them for a while. And several of the leaders actually thought that if they took, what we were saying is that if they took the survey, the performance of the organization would improve. And I admired them for that, but, but it's like, no, you have to do something. Our friend and colleague, Michael Beer from Harvard, from the business school, said, yeah, just because you stand on the scales, doesn't mean you lose weight in this. So it's about translating the results into action here. And, who does that? How do you organize that? How do you orchestrate that? How does that unfold? How does that converge? But, then what's the impact in that, in real terms? There's a difference between planning and action. Action, planning, and action are two completely different worlds, and that's where the value comes. And we may make 2 or 3 trips around here, especially over with organizations where we work, for several years, but it continues because they want to stay stellar in their results and in their performance. We made it around the circle here, and that brings us back to the importance of understanding this as a process. If there's a simpler, easier, more direct way to change an organization, do it. When there isn't, understanding the full complexity and the opportunities of what you're getting yourself into, that ends up being pretty important.